Welcome back to Italy, and to the most transformative day this abandoned palace has seen in nearly a century. Finally completing the transformation of the old dining room into a brand new kitchen that's DIY built with just thrifted furniture. Join me on today's extraordinary episode as we push the limits of what's possible, trying to create the highest end bespoke finish using just our hands and local craftsmanship. You won't want to miss this one, guys. Starting right after today's video sponsor. Let's go roaring back in time to the 1920s to this stunning hidden object mystery game that I've been enjoying for the last few weeks. Join me in taking on the role of amateur detective June Parker as we discover the secrets behind her sister's murder. But this journey of discovering new clues and plot twists isn't all, as you run parallel to rebuilding the family estate of your sister, earning resources as the mystery develops so that you can help renovate the local landmarks, and much like our own works on this palace, bring new life to this grand old estate. So how does it work? Well, you simply follow along the gripping story set within these beautiful visuals. Each game you play inside of the hidden object scenes gradually drives the story forward whilst increasing the challenge. This unlocks the resources you need to reveal new features and decorations that you can use to build and develop your island. A nice cozy way that, for me at least, allows me to get that creative satisfaction while our own renovations take a fair bit longer. All combined with receiving unique timed rewards you get just by playing, I invite you to download June's Journey today by scanning the QR code shown on screen now or clicking the link in the description. So let's pick up with the state of things as they were when we last visited this space in episode 3. We had, in theory, proved that infilling the kitchen would create a beautiful island, but we had yet to make it work in practice. We had attempted to mount this stunning chandelier we'd been lugging around with us for years, and after building this enormous scaffold, we realized that even with a freshly wired connection, we'd need the intervention of the electricians to make it work. So with the plumbing at least sorted in the island itself, we got to centering it all correctly and starting to fix it all into place and actually build the structure through bespoke measurements and cutting ourselves so that we could create a strong enough support for the very heavy marble that was destined to sit above in just a few short days. The forward part of this framing would also be visible on both of the facades, and we chose to go for this more simple structural finish rather than going for a more elaborate column. One of the really tricky things here was inherited by using the thrifted furniture, which of course, because they were handmade and they bookended the island, they were slightly out of measurement by a few millimeters both in height and width from each other. You'll also notice throughout this process we were intermittently deconstructing one of the sides of the island to reinsert the scaffolding to try again with the lighting, and each time failed. But this was at least balanced out by the more satisfying completion of a frontage which we had bespokely made by a local carpenter. This is in solid oak wood, and of course the idea would be to color match it to the other cabinets, but at least it has a classical form and border with an empty center that would allow us to infill with more decorative elements in future if desired. And so with 5 more doors put on order, attention turned to creating the centerpiece of the island, which would be the sink and this fabulous Victorian style gooseneck faucet. And so it was back to custom cutting after triple measuring everything and then hoping for the best. And we were by no means professional woodworkers, although we were reassured by the fact that none of this would be visible. And while normally we would crunch and push through into the night with a job like this, the lack of an overhead light meant that we had to wait for daylight to continue with each step. But with these elements of an actual kitchen going in and fitting like a glove, we were encouraged that things were really starting to come together. So much so that we again rebuilt the full island on the understanding that the electricians would not be coming anytime soon due to it being the middle of August. And with the island temporarily on hold, attention turned to this sideboard, one of 2, where we wanted to create something rather special. So what's the situation with our smart cabinet?
Right, so we need to fit the disappearing wastage hole here, which will incorporate a piece of the marble that we will cut out. We could be fixing this from below, and look, we've got basically these two struts.
Yeah,
We've got these two support struts for the countertop to create the drawer hole. And look how perfect this slides in. Look.
Destiny!
Look, we don't even have half a centimeter of leeway. It's actually bespoke, look. And this is great because it's perfectly aligned with the center of this half cabinet.
That's cool, meant to be, baby. Speaking of the marble, it was time to visit the local craftsman to finally choose what was going to be the finished look of the countertops. Now, if you'd followed my Instagram a few weeks ago, I had asked which of these two types of Carrara, the lighter grey or more white with thinner veins, was preferable. And in the end, we went for the former because it closely mirrors another type of marble we love, which has more of a greyish hue called Bardiglio. With that rather agonizing choice made, they went ahead and reached the point of no return by cutting that beauty to size. And here we can see the machine hard at work for the main piece of marble that will go on the island, and curiously you can see that it's actually two pieces that are butterflied together. It seems that we had surpassed the limit of what would be possible with a single piece of marble, so large is the island. But butterfly marble is actually something we've seen before in our own palazzo, in that famous blue marble bathroom renovated nearly a century ago. Created by making sure that the cuts are from the same slab of marble and then inverting each piece when placed side by side, making sure that this natural veining meets at the center point to create a whole new shape. And you know how much I love symmetry. There's honestly so much to geek out about marble, but I'll spare you guys. And with the smaller pieces of countertops already cut for the sideboards, we could get straight back to work. We have this marble inset. Now this is being cut from the larger piece, which is going to go on top. So we haven't seen it yet, but in theory the veins should all line up. Quite anxious to see if that's the case, but as you can see, this tray of course just comes predisposed with this same finish. You can kind of see behind this sticker here, which we can take off later, is the same sort of brushed metal. And so we just cut this insert to the exact same size. It slots in on top here. And there we have it. Let's now see how it's going to look with the marble on top. But you'll notice that there's this very thin perimeter, and this is where any excess water should be collected. It then gets taken by the drain down into the system. Don't you just love it when a good plan comes together? And there was no need for that anxiety because the marble lines up perfectly. Now with the tap going in situ, I can show you under the hood how it all works. And everything was fitting so neat and snug, even with the door shut. Everything just seemed to come together surprisingly smoothly, giving us safe drinking water for the very first time, and the drainage worked exactly as it should have done. And now, for the part I was anxiously putting off, the colour matching of the stain of the fresh wood with the antique. Now, we went to our local supply store and we found a range of colours, and by playing with a mix of the two most similar, we actually got a very good result. Now, emerging from the depths of August, the electricians were back on the scene and able to redo the wiring where needed behind the scenes so that we could finally get this light working. But here came the tentative moment of both trying to decide the height from which it would hang and also making sure that it was fully secure. And I'm not just talking about the chandelier chain here, I'm also slightly worried about the scaffold too. You can see the relief on poor M's face as he realizes that the weight can indeed sustain itself. And after all this trial and error, the moment of truth remained. Would it work? Well, it seems our lucky number finally came in, and as you can see, the illumination is utterly stunning. This signaled us being able to finish the smart cabinet as the electrification of the room was connected to this cable that will eventually be placed in that circular box at the top of the wall, but for now is pegged behind the shelving, running to the outlet on the floor. Ironically though, the shift in the sun's position due to the changing season actually gave us much more radiant light in the afternoon, so it wasn't always needed. Such is the ever-changing character of this ancient property, which reveals itself bit by bit. But no rest for us, of course, because it was now time to measure out the finite positioning of the hinges so that we could marry the bespoke element of the frontages, which had all now been delivered, with the base units of IKEA, which is the unseen part infilling the middle section of the island. With this now being our fourth major kitchen build in as many years, we've come to understand that at least from the latest iterations of IKEA's internal hardware and features, they provide some of the most excellent options on the market for creating interesting solutions for inside your cabinets. One change I did make was to use Italian hinges because I was unsure that the native ones that they use would be strong enough to carry these frontages, which are significantly heavier than their normal stock. It was only during installation I got the sudden fear that actually using my own hinge system would mean that the cabinet fronts would not align. No need for that fear though, because they look stunning. And with that third frontage temporarily put in place that will eventually cover the dishwasher, I was so satisfied with the end result. The rest would need to wait for now though, because a very important delivery was being made. The first half of the grand marble countertop pulled up into the piazzale of the palace. A moment months in the waiting, and the artisans were so proud of their work that they even took a series of their own photos and videos for me to share with you, showing the final stages of the island's preparation. And this is a level of artisanship which truly I feel so blessed to be living in Italy for. But their work's dazzling beauty was replaced by heart palpitations, because as you can see, even just cut in half, this island marble is immensely heavy. Just listen to the noise it makes as it gets pivoted into position. And with a sigh of relief, the first piece is pushed into position, starting to lock into place the plumbing and electrics which have been built into the island in recent weeks. But it was whilst we were waiting for the second piece that I realized that the wood had started to bow in the weeks that we had installed the structure. With the second piece being wheeled in, to my horror, there was no time to make any adjustments, and we simply had to go ahead and see what we could do after the fact. Now, this is typically the moment in my experience when you're in the final stretch that something goes horribly wrong. And there was so much tension as it slowly got slid into place. Was the little marble lip where the front of the sink would be going to snap off? Would they line up correctly? We'd been able to avoid any breakages, but if the join wasn't correct and perfectly seamless, then it would just look like a farce. Now, the slight bowing I detected did create a minor issue with the join, but to my relief, this is not an uncommon situation with the joining of marble, and so the artisans got quick to work at making sure the join was perfectly formed. And just like that, the room has come to life, with the light from above now being reflected, radiating out, and with the craftsman due to return in a few days to resin the join smoothly together, we could see the end in sight. But we weren't quite done yet, as we still needed to construct the larger of the two sideboards, the one that would sit along the central axis and complement the island on one flank. And to me, this was so important to add to the space to give a sense of harmony and balance. But one thing we need to consider is how exactly we use this cabinet. Of course, below we can use all sorts of utilities, but above is an exhibition space of sorts. We could reattach these old doors with its heavy glass, or we could keep the cabinet open. What do you think? Now, to complete the room, of course, we need the cooking range. This was delivered a little earlier on in the project, but I haven't drawn much attention to it because there's a huge amount that we have designed for this whole aspect. But you can see, even without our plans enacted yet, it fits gloriously between the two windows, and this provides an optimal moment to talk about lighting. Now, as you can see above the cooker, there's two appliques which are ripe for being revived, and the question is, what do we go for? Of course, over on the taller sideboard, we want to do up lighting, but also down lighting too, both below and within the cabinet. And then on the smart cabinet side, of course, there's also the two symmetrical appliques we want to revive, and then these shelving units that, again, with that subtle suffused down lighting, can make the motifs of the wood and the marble shine. Another element I'd love your opinion on, which we're just playing around with, are these Louis XIV style bar stools, which we thrifted locally. And I think their form is quite lovely, but I'm not sure about the color palette. And finally, we should discuss the decorations, like this skirting, which I think is perfect. And this is actually the perfect moment to have the discussion down in the comments below before we make our final decisions about the middle section. Now, of course, the stain, as you can see on the structure that we built there, is quite excellent and will carry across, just like that beading above. As for the handles, the question is, do we go for something which is in keeping in style or something which is purposefully avant-garde and different? And as you can see from the existing handles, we're already setting ourselves up for a bit of a clash in the metals department, as these are of course in brass, whilst we've gone for chromeware with most of our modern finishes. But taking a step back a moment to appreciate what has been done in these few short weeks, I think we can inaugurate the build phase of this kitchen as being complete. And boy, have we come a long way together. Finally, with the kitchen usable, we can start to build out to the other noble rooms of the piano nobile, and not just think about the utility of these spaces, but rather how we can make them beautiful, and a space where being in them is so much more than reviving the ghosts of the past, but about creating a legacy for the future. Putting all of our hard work towards moments like this is what it's all about, and of course bringing you along on the journey too. And with that, I am off to play another round of June's Journey. If you'd like to join me, go ahead and download it now. Until next time, love from Italy.